Hey, Bob Nolan here with Thought Provokers, and what could be more provocative than talking about other people's money, like yours? Don't stop watching. No pressure for money. In fact, I want to take pressure off. This SOS is statutory, obligatory supplies. I've changed a lot in my mind over the years on Bible interpretation, theology, my understanding of God and people. I hope I've changed for the better. But there's one thing I've changed on radically. I mean, I've done a 180. And that's on my teaching on what they call the tithe and my beliefs. 10% the tithe. I regret my beliefs about it and regret how teaching my beliefs affected people both practically and perhaps even in their relationship with God. In a word, my teaching and influence regarding the tithe made God look mean and harsh and unreasonable. He's none of those things. If you care to see my little explanation about a common teaching of the mandatory tithe, there's a link on your screen just below this video. You might even want to pause the video and read it if you got the time, about 4 minutes long. A little more detail that I want to get into on this quick SOS video. The issue with the doctrine of mandatory tithing, and it's there, is that it does not exist. The tithe was the tax of the Old Covenant nation of Israel. The Old Testament was the constitution of ancient Israel, and the tithe was 10%. Now, to lay this obligation on people today is wrong. I regret believing it. I really did believe it, mainly because I listened to the experts, and the experts are wrong about this. Scripture verses are used from the Old Testament to tell people they're literally stealing from God if they don't pay their tithe. They're also told that the tithe was to be brought into the storehouse, and the storehouse in the New Testament is their local church or the ministry they're involved in, or even an individual minister. This is Looney Tunes theology. There's no connection between the Old Testament storehouse and the church or ministry or individual minister. It's not my or anyone else's business if you decide to donate or where you decide to donate it. If someone asks you to donate to their cause or ministry, that's their business. If you decide to donate, that's your business. You don't owe your tithe anywhere, and that includes even God. Jesus made it clear that taking care of your family superseded giving to religion. I'll put the scripture on the screen. This provoker is not personal toward anyone. I regret and have changed my mentality about this mandatory thing. Some will avoid the nasty sound of the tithe being mandatory, saying, well, it's not a law, it's a principle. Is there much of a difference between a law and a principle for a sincere believer? The tithe is never taught, even in the Old Testament, as a principle. It was the law. That law is now obsolete because the Old Covenant is obsolete. If you came to find that paying your taxes was not a law but just a principle, would you pay your taxes? Not me! One definition of legalism that I've heard is insisting on something that God doesn't insist on or forbidding something that God doesn't forbid. I think that's a pretty good short definition. To pressure people to pay something that God does not insist on is to saddle them with a bogus load. To tell someone, especially someone who's struggling to care for his family, that they're robbing God if they don't tithe is spiritually abusive. I don't usually ask people to share my videos or posts, but share this one, maybe with someone who needs to consider it. And like the guy on TV said, tell me where I'm going wrong. I'll take the heat. This could disturb some groups whose livelihood or system depend on mandatory tithing. Oh well. Somebody asked me, what will happen to all the churches or ministries or preachers whose budget depends on mandatory tithing? I said, that is a good question. I'm Bob Nolan with Thought Provokers. This has been another SOS. And remember, don't raise your voice. Improve your argument. You take care.